All right, so I want us to get into the discussion that I promised earlier. Let me introduce my guest. I'm talking to Ndengwa Njiru, who is a lawyer. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And good morning on a Monday.
Good morning to you. How are you doing?
Great.
Great.
So I want us to start the conversation from the two stories that set the stage for us. And yes, tomorrow we're expecting that Raila Odinga would be sworn in. First of all, why do you think that that is not going to happen? And up until now, there's no clear date on when that will happen.
I think when the announcement was made, there was a lot of expectations and, of course, a mixture of excitement and condemnation, depending on which side of the divide you are. And then all of a sudden, we then heard that there was this postponement. To me, I think largely it has not been postponed because of any fear or intimidation from any quarter, but because of the question of whereabouts of Kalonzo Musyoka.
Oh, okay.
Because apparently, in my thinking, that would not have happened in his absentia. There were proposals that they were to swear him in wherever he may be. But the question would then be, what would the legitimacy of such kind of a swearing in? And not forget as well that there is also a question of the legitimacy of Raila Odinga swearing in. I think those are some of the issues that have really made it difficult for them to go on with the swearing in, and also considering that people are also fatigued with the whole processes. Since March this year, the country has just been stagnant and mark timing on issues of politics. So I think those are some of the reasons that have made them to probably reconsider to postpone it to a later date. Yeah.
Interesting. So to you, you're not seeing that this has been precipitated by the fact that the AG came out very strong last week?
You know, me, Betty, we need to understand our constitution. We also need to understand the background upon which Section 40 of the Penal Code was enacted. Can I just give a brief synopsis of Section 40? And how it originated and how it got us to where we are today. You remember in 1975, there was, during that time, the President Mzee Kenyatta was in his old days, and at times he would not be seen as if he's in so much control of the state. And so there came a movement that was led by people like the late Keheka Kimani and others. And the movement was meant to make sure that the Keheka Kimani-led group, which was called the Change the Constitution movement, was trying to design the succession politics of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. And so that is when the then Attorney General, Charles Jonjo, came up with that enactment. And he said that even thinking or contemplating of the death of the president was treasonable. And so he expounded, even thinking and contemplating that the president can die in Kenya, even to date, is treasonable. Just thinking like Uhuru Kenyatta tomorrow may not wake up, you will be held liable for treason. Why was that so? That was so because they wanted to control the succession politics of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta in 1975. And there was a group of Mount Kenya guys who felt like we need to design who takes over from Mzee. And of course, the change was meant to make sure that the then president, the retired president, Moi, never succeeds Kenyatta. So that is the basis and the background of the enactment. The other background of the enactment is from the monarch perspective. Remember, Kenya was a colony of the British.
Yes.
And the British is and the monarch is the only sanctity, political sanctity that can ever exist at any given time in English law and in England. So any person who could have been perceived like you could wage war against Her Majesty or His Majesty government, you would be perceived to be conducting issues of treason. But remember, when you try to compare the two systems, the monarch, which was the origin of these treasonable laws, and the way the world has been able to evolve to an extent that now power is no longer dealt with from a monarch perspective, but from a democratic perspective, where Mwananchi has the ability to go and decide who becomes the president or who becomes what. then you realize that that law of treason itself, even being in our laws of Kenya today, may not be having a concrete place in the Kenyan dynamic political and legal fields. Why? Because there can never be any other monarch in English or in England. There can never be any two queens or any queen or a king in English land, and that queen is not as a result of a democratic process, is as a result of an entitlement from the monarch perspective and history.
All right.
But in Kenya, for you to become the president, you must involve the people. That takes me then to the question whether or not those laws are still valid in the Kenyan jurisprudence today. Secondly, moving on and trying to extrapolate the Constitution, where Article 1 says that power belongs to the people and they shall exercise their sovereignty in accordance to this Constitution. So the question is then, how and when does the power of the people begin, and at what time does it stop? That's a legitimate question when you're trying to answer whether or not Raila Odinga can be charged for treason. Secondly, if you look at Article 1, Clause 2, it says that people shall exercise their sovereignty either directly or indirectly. So essentially what has happened in our Constitution, it has realized the place of Mwananchi insofar as determining the government of the day. And because of the history that this country has been having, all the way from the times of Jomo Kenyatta, the times of President Moi, a situation whereby Kenyans were not really given an opportunity. And we cannot blame them. We cannot even blame either President Moi or President Jomo Kenyatta. The country, the whole world was at that particular time. The democratic space had not expanded as it is today.
Right.
That's why we cannot actually point fingers at them.
So,
but the question then is, with the history that Kenyans had during those two regimes, where the democratic place was so constrained and limited to few individuals, Kenyans decided that they needed to expand their scope and to make sure that Kenyans' democratic power is not fully usurped by the elected leaders. That is when they introduced two concepts that Kenyans tend to forget off or to forget about. The first principle of the Constitution that was enacted is that it enacted two avenues or two highways through which Mwananchi can exercise his powers, either directly or indirectly. Directly means that the Constitution has enacted what is called in political terms as participatory democracy. And indirectly means that the Constitution has recognized the place of the delegated democracy.
Right. Where it comes to the elected leaders.
Where it comes to the elected leaders. That means that these two systems must coexist at any given two times and must always at any given time complement each other. So when Raila Odinga comes and says that I am going to the people, I am going to be established as the people's president, I am going to establish people's assemblies, he's clinging on that aspect of participatory democracy because Mwananchi has not fully donated his powers to the elected leaders. And that is why today, Parliament or the county assemblies cannot enact a law that, without initiating what is called, popularly now called as public participation. Why? Because these assemblies and these parliaments and even the presidency or the governorship in those counties are driving their validity and their powers from the people.
From the people. All right.
So the interesting thing, Betty, is that the question of the legitimacy of the People's Assembly cannot then be wished away. Because at the end of the day, who is supreme? Is it the elected leaders or the elected established institutions or the people?
All right. We'll come back to continue this discussion after this short commercial break that we're taking right now. Don't go away.